Let us now look at what are the methods and methodologies that we can use to assess internships, right? So this can be a little bit tricky because unlike your regular courses wherein we can have a very structured way of conducting quizzes and exams, assign marks, and then we can do the assessment, right? Internship is slightly more challenging and because it includes the experiential element. Okay, now whatever the assessment that techniques that we are going to use, it can be relevant for both education institutions as well as the as well as the industry, right? So because we also said that the institutions themselves might be offering internships in their labs, or it could be the internships that are being carried out in the industry. So the main assessment elements that need to be assessed in an internship is comprised of skills and competencies. Okay, so skills is nothing but the ability to perform specific tasks. Okay, so in these days of extensive automation all around us, this generally always involves the use of tools, right? So, I mean, everything from computer programming to the ability to create very attractive slides using PowerPoint or using Excel for data crunching, right? So, all these are considered skills. And of course, we use the term soft skills as well. For example, communication skills, they are all considered as soft skills. Now, of course, there are no tools we are talking about here, but the thing is, yeah, skills are something which is very specific, to be able to carry out one specific task. On the other hand, competencies are slightly more abstract in nature. Okay, so it is this ability to solve problems in a given job, right? So you are given particular assignment, and then you are expected to do that. So it requires a specific understanding of that particular domain, right? And obviously in that particular domain there may be specific tools, specific skills that you may have to bring forth in order to completely solve that particular problem. So this is competencies. Okay, skills are generally related to tools. Along similar lines, competencies are related to the domain or the branch of study, right? So which means that the competencies that we expect from, say, a computer science graduate may be different and from the competencies that you expect from, say, a civil engineering graduate, right? So there could be some common set of competencies that may be there. For example, project management, right? So project management can be a competency which is common across, say, software engineering versus a bridge construction, right? But the point is that the specific tasks that you do in a project is varying between these software engineering project and a bridge construction project. So to that extent, the competencies could be highly domain specific. Okay, so as I said, in order to demonstrate that particular competency, it may involve the need to use different tools, because at the end of the day, when you want to solve a problem, you not only want to solve it correctly, but you also want to do it with high efficiency and good quality. And all of these things require very skilled use of different tools. So when we get into the evaluation, so we also have to get into the evaluation of internship across evaluating the skills and evaluating the competencies. So when we are trying to evaluate the skills, we have to evaluate the breadth as well, right? So for example, a new intern is joining your project, then we need to keep an eye on how many new tools did the intern learn, right? So why are we even putting this under internship under experiential learning? Because there is only a limited number of skills that any academic program can provide, right? So whether it is a diploma program or whether it is a undergraduate program or a postgraduate program, there is always a finite level of tools or skills that we can expose the students to, right? So we have, for example, what is the mechanism to give skills within the curriculum? We have the lab courses, right? So the lab courses are intended to give exposure to the skills needed in that particular branch or in that domain. But then there could be more that may be relevant when it comes to that particular industry sector. So from an internship point of view, we have to keep an eye on how many different varieties of tools skills did the student pick up, and that can generally be directly correlated with the number of tools that they are learning. The second aspect of within the skills itself is the depth. Okay. Once again, now if we did talk about labs, right? So if we are talking about labs, we may be giving them exposure to, say, object-oriented programming in a computer programming lab, right? And within that, we may be doing some lab exercises in Java. Okay. But then within those lab exercises, we may not be exploring all aspects of the Java programming language. So there could be some specific aspects of the programming language which never got exposed to, right? So they may be very advanced concepts. For example, like a thread programming in Java, right? So we have to also, from an internship assessment point of view, we have to look for the ability, whether the intern picked up breadth on any specific skills that might be out there, right? So very deep skills, what is it that they are picking up? So generally we would want a reasonable amount of breadth, but then at least depth in one or two, right? And the ability to learn is also an important part of it that we need to observe, right? So we talk about the learnability, right? The ability to learn. How quickly is the intern able to learn? In fact, this is a very valuable metric to look at, because many organizations, when they come for campus interviews, right? So I have myself been in part of the interview panels when I was with the industry. So we say that, okay, my particular organization requires this specific skill, and this may not be part of the curriculum because of it the student doesn't know that, okay? But then we also look at evidences to show how quickly is the student able to pick up new skills. So that is also an important part of evaluating on the skill dimension. On the competency side, we can look at technical competencies, as I said, which is highly domain specific, branch specific, discipline specific. And typically we would want to look at those competencies which are not, which goes beyond what we have been able to accomplish in our course assignments, right? Broadly within our curriculum, labs will focus on skills, and assignments and projects will focus on competencies, right? So that is how the general structure in a typical curriculum is. So when we are trying to evaluate competencies, we want to see their ability to go beyond what is covered in the curriculum, what is covered in the classroom. Okay, so that could be that is what they would comprise the technical competencies. And of course, the overall problem solving ability, which is the systems thinking, and this is where a little bit of multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity skills also will play a role in developing this particular competency. And finally, the teamwork, right? Their ability to work in a team and synergistically try to contribute to solve a larger problem. This is again a big difference between the campus learning versus learning as part of an internship, right? When I am doing my assignment, I focus my own ability to complete that. I probably will not even share from a competitive perspective, right? In fact, our whole pedagogy is driven around that, right? So whenever we do give them individual assignments, we actually penalize them for sharing it with others or even copying from others, right? But while that is very important, where when you go outside, when somebody is doing an internship, the focus is their collective responsibility to solve the problem. Okay, so because most of the times the problems are so complex that it is not possible for a single individual to solve the problem. So we want to observe the ability of them to seek help, to work with others, to seek help, and even to offer help based on. So then what will happen is when the team is trying to synergistically solve a problem, right? So that brings forth their collaborative abilities, right? So the ability to work in teams, ability to collaborate happens to be a very, very valuable industry competency, right? So that is something that has to be developed, and this is something that we have to be able to observe as part of the assessment. And finally, the professional and the value system, professional values and ethics, right? That is something that needs to be inculcated. Probably this is the first opportunity to understand what is professional courtesy, right? And for example, in a we are already talking about teamwork, right? So in a team meeting, does one put down their team members because they didn't do their proper the work properly, because of which the overall project could not be completed within the time, or one particular module could not be completed, right? So that is considered to be unprofessional, to put down your team members, but then you are expected to work with them individually, try to see if you can help, and so on, right? So there are also lots of ethical aspects that come into the picture. And of course, this is more of a carry forward of the ethics in an educational setting to a professional setting, right? In an educational setting, when we talk about ethics, we say that they should not plagiarize, they should give credit where it is due, and so on. Here also, the ethics comes into the picture, right? So when they complete a certain task, their ability to be ethical and acknowledge the contributions from their teammates without necessarily quote unquote lying and taking all the credit for yourself, that is considered unethical, right? So these are some of the things that we can observe for evaluating the overall competencies of our interns. What could be the general assessment methods that we can use? One very most important element will be the assessment provided by the mentors, right? So this will clearly give the industry practitioners perspective, right? They are the ones who have assigned the work, they are the ones who have the opportunity to observe exactly all those things that we just talked about on skills and competencies. So their inputs will be invaluable. Okay, and while we do give a lot of importance to the mentors evaluation from the industry practitioners perspective, we should also remember that we do talk about teamwork, and there is a 360-degree mentorship also that is going around. So this is also a new model that is emerging, where we don't talk about a single mentor completely hand-holding an intern throughout their journey. So we also expect that each individual who is capable and competent, they themselves serve as mentors to others in collectively solving the problem. So this is where the 360-degree feedback also becomes valuable, right? So the 360-degree feedback can be collected to say to what extent did the intern try to help them in overcoming their own problems, and the extent to which the intern was forthcoming to seek help as well. Seeking help is also an important aspect in effectively solving problems in a team environment. And there has to be instruments for real-time observation of competencies. So this could be coming up in the form of minutes of the meeting, of team meetings, or just the mentor or observing the interns' behavior, interns' participation, and some way to record all of these things in a timely manner so that it doesn't get missed out or forgetting. So maintaining some kind of a logbook would be a very useful tool in this particular process. Right? We also have to give importance to the inputs that we receive from self-assessment. Right? There could be a lot of things that are happening that the student intern is doing, which is not directly observed by the mentors, even with 360-degree feedback. Okay, so the self-reflection becomes a very important part to consider here. So we have to, so this also brings in a level of trust in the system, right? If we constantly rely only on somebody else's assessment and feedback, it also passes on the message that we don't trust the interns themselves to be able to tell what is it that they did. So this also needs to be consciously factored in. Okay, so this also encourages the student to reflect and improve self-awareness. Right? We always say that self-awareness is important for the for any professional to be proactive. Right? If the professional is not self-aware on their own abilities, confidence to solve problems, then they will not be proactive to pick up problems on their own and solve the problem. So they will be waiting to be told what to do, right? So that is not something which is a very healthy trait. And overall, we also have to create mechanisms to observe process and product quality. Okay, so by process quality, this is the extent of alignment with the organizational process, right? So we talked about professional values and ethics and so on. All of these things can be easily noticed or observed and evaluated using the organizational process. Right, as part of the organizational process, suppose I am expected before the end of every day, I am supposed to log into a system and log what are the activities that I did. Right, so that is an example of an organizational process. As part of one particular project, if I am supposed to document how am I going to test. Right, so suppose I am given the responsibility to test a system. Okay. So if I am expected to document that, saying what are the test cases that I have done, what is my observation recording, that if I am expected to diligently document it in a particular way, so that is part of the organizational process. If the intern is simply saying it is a pass or a fail, then without providing additional details, then it is not really aligning with the process quality that we are expecting on the way things to be done. Okay, and of course we talk about the product quality, which is essentially the number of defects that are observed in whatever work product that they are doing. Right, again, if you go back to the task of testing, and then if they reported that something is defective, but on closer observation it turns out that due to their own lack of understanding of that particular activity, they marked something something as a defect, whereas it is not a defect, but this is the way it is supposed to behave. Right, so these are all defective work products that they are creating. So that is also a very objective way of looking at what is their product quality. Broadly, process versus product quality, both are important, right? There is a classic saying, right? When we are saying, are we doing things right? Right? Which is essentially the process that we are talking about, right? When we are talking about, are we building the right product, right? So then, which means that is a product quality that we are talking about. So both process quality and product quality are extremely important, and that is something that needs to be observed and assessed. And overall, we need to be able to have some mechanism. After all, we are talking about an assessment. It can be formal or informal, but we need to have ability to add, provide credibility to this overall thing. So we are not saying that anything that the mentor is saying true, or we are saying we need to rely only on the self-assessment, right? So overall, we need to create an environment where whatever observations we are doing, whatever assessments we are doing, whatever evaluations we are doing, it is credible. And one of the credibility is to triangulate our data points, right? So we have to combine input from multiple sources and make sure it is correlated, right? For example, if there is a self-assessment report that the student is saying that that they have learned a specific skill, and if it turns out that the mentor is also mentioning that this particular student used this skill to solve this particular problem, then there is some amount of credibility that is attached to both of those things, right? To what the mentor is saying as well as what the self-assessment report contained. So that is one way of adding credibility to the overall assessments. We never like assigning grades, but we have to label, right? So labeling becomes an important part to more as a feedback mechanism, right? So this can be intermediate, it can be at the end of the internship, but there has to be a way to assign some labels, which I am calling as grades from an academic point of view, right? So I mean, you can decide how many levels, but generally these are the levels that we think of: novice, developing, proficient, and advanced, right? Which means that if somebody is able to carry out some things with significant amount of handholding and guidance, and possibly in that process they make up errors, then we can say that for that particular skill or a competency, you are at a novice level, right? And developing is basically, you are able to work independently with occasional guidance that is required, which means that basic familiarity is already attained, right? So proficiency is greater level of independence to work, right? So with minimal or no supervision at all. And our advanced means, of course, they have reached a level where they are so competent and confident that they are able to now lead and even innovate to create newer ways to solve the problems, which is more efficient. And this is where your metrics that we talked about, right? The process quality and the product quality, they also can be superimposed on this from novice to developing to proficient to advanced. What I want to also mention here is that this can be applied to both skills and competencies. Okay. So finally, we need to be able to put them all together in the form of rubrics, right? So rubrics, we know we talk about the SMART principle to come up with rubrics. So which means that whatever we are trying to assess, we need to be, it has to be specific, which means that it cannot be general purpose. So if you are talking about trying to assess, creating a rubric for a specific tool, it has to be some specific tasks within that particular tool, right? For example, if you are talking about assessing, creating a rubric for assessing their Excel skills, then we have to say that creation ability to create pivot tables, right? So so it has to be that specific. We cannot say how well is the student able to use Excel. That may not be very specific. So which means that it should also be measurable, right? So when they actually show that they are able to do that pivot table, then we are able to say confidently that yes, this pivot table, the student is able to create the pivot table. And it should be attainable, right? And which means that there are multiple aspects to this attainability, right? Attainability also comes with with the availability of those tools, right? So if you create a rubric which says that they should be able to create pivot tables, they should learn to create pivot tables, but then you don't provide them with any computers to be able to actually create those, use Excel and create the tables, right? So that doesn't make sense. So which means that it has to be attainable and relevant to the job, and it has to be done in a time bound manner, right? So that is why it becomes these parameters become a very important part of the rubric. And we should not combine them, right? So we have to have separate for skills and competencies, and we can also have graded levels, right? We start with simple levels and then increase the complexity for the same skill, right? So we can have a rubric which is starting from, which is probably relevant to a novice level, and then you keep going to the advanced levels, right? So the rubrics for a novice level can be different from the rubrics that you would attach to the advanced level and beyond. So the advantage of doing this is that it is also motivating to the student, right? So straight away you start assessing them with rubrics associated with advanced users, it can be highly demotivating, right? But on the other hand, you say that this is also an achievement levels that you can, targets that you can set. So that becomes a very nice way to progress. We also have to balance depth and breadth. Typically we talk about quality versus quantity, right? I don't know. Do we want the intern to be there at the intermediate level across 10 different tools, or would we rather have them being novice, right? At least with 10, 15 different tools, but at least go into advanced depth for maybe 2 skills, right? The same thing can be talked about competencies, right? So even competencies, what did we say is the difference between competency and skills? We said competency is basically problem solving, specific problem solving in that particular domain, right? Now there can be simple problems, there can be complex problems. So there also we need to have a good mix of quantity versus quality. So that is, balancing is an extremely important part of this particular rubrics. Okay, finally, this is something that as educators, this we talk about it, right? So even in the other modules of this whole assessment is the transparency. Okay, both the assessor and the assessee have to be on the same page, right? Which means that if you are talking about the mentors who are doing the assessment, and if it is the students who are getting assessed, they need to be told, right? So what are the skills and competencies on which they will be assessed, okay? And there should be transparency on the rubrics as well, okay? Yes, I can understand that one of the downsides of strict rubrics based assessment is that many times the learners end up limiting their learning just to the rubrics, just to master the rubrics, okay? But I don't think that kind of a concern is relevant in the internship kind of a scenario, because that is something that students tend to do where specific marks are assigned, okay? So this kind of boils down to the overall assessment, right? So overall grade for an internship, right? It should generally not be specific marks that we award, right? So normally what is acceptable is that overall internship can be satisfactory versus unsatisfactory, but then there should be a detailed assessment report which kind of tells them their rubrics and their levels, level of competencies across various skills and competencies. Okay, so that is an important addendum that has to go there, instead of branding them as saying that, okay, overall you are not good enough, right? So it's generally what we do is we never fail people in internship activities, right? Unless they never showed up, and there could be other disciplinary issues because of which we may choose not to clear somebody's internship. But internship is always about going through that process, right? So when they go through that particular process, then what is it that they have achieved? So then the second level, so internship is just a binary thing. Did they go through the internship process or not? Yes or no. It's also as simple as that. But I'm not saying we should stop there. That should be followed up with a detailed report of what all the skills that they have acquired and what is their level at which those skills have been there, all the way from novice to. So you can imagine this to be a matrix, right? So all the skills are written on along the rows, and then you put a column, right? In which ones are they novice, in which ones they have achieved intermediate, in which ones they have reached the advanced levels. You kind of put a tick mark. Along similarly for competencies, right? So this is what will complete a typical internship assessment. Okay. So once we have completed the internship assessment, we have to close the loop, right? So what do we mean by closing the loop? Okay. Firstly, we have to have a mechanism to collect the assessment data of interns. Okay. We just now talked about it, right? It is just not about the amount of marks that they obtain. It's not an exam. It's not a course in which you conduct a single exam or two exams and then use some formula to compute it and come up with a number, right? Internship assessment doesn't work that way. So, which means that there is a lot of qualitative input that is coming in. So, we need to be able to collect that qualitative assessment and have some kind of a qualitative, and of course, it will include some amount of quantitative data as well, right? In terms of the number of skills that they learned and so on. So now these days we are talking about data analysis skills, right? So now this is where we are talking about skills, right? So data analysis skills as being a very core skill that we as academicians and instructors and administrators need to have. So as an institution, we have to put together a competent team to analyze the collected data. Okay. Even at this level, we can immediately figure out that the skills, probably a good amount of Excel skills will be required. And the competency here is essentially to do analytics on this and prepare very useful, very insightful reports from the data. Okay. So once that analysis is done, then we can invite the analysis team, and then we should conduct reflection, one or more reflection sessions, right? Which is typically probably an annual review. Whether it is combined or separate, it depends upon the depth of the discussions that you may want to have. You may want to involve the heads of the departments, the faculty members, the course instructors, right? If there are some specific patterns that we are seeing with respect to say at a very specific skill level, then we may need the course instructors to strengthen the lab component of one particular course where that particular skill is expected to be covered, right? So that is why we need a 360-degree involvement across in these reflection sessions, right? And there may also be a need for curriculum realignment based on what we have seen. If it turns out that almost everybody is expecting certain competency to be there, and it turns out that for across the board, something which is a very basic competency that the industry thinks is a basic competency, which we didn't think as an academician, as a curriculum developer, we were not aware of, and everybody is flagged as novice on that one, then that is something truly that we have to reflect upon and say, how do you squeeze that back into our curriculum in some form? Okay, I can give you some really practical assessment, feedback that we received for internships, right? So now you think that you assume that ECE, you talk about electronics and communication engineering. So when the interns go there, you would assume that they will be working on on say some semiconductor work, semiconductor design, VLSI design, and things like that. So, to our surprise, it turns out that there is a lot of AI and machine learning activity being carried out, as part of within the ECE group itself, within the VLSI group where the interns were there. So, when they were given certain activities to do, say some kind of clustering algorithms on some data that they had covered, then the students were no, they were not aware, because no, I'm talking about not now, but a few years ago. So where no, machine learning was considered to be more of a computer science skill. Okay, I'm talking about the days where data science programs were not even in existence. So that particular feedback immediately can trigger the thought process within the curriculum development company teams to say that, to come together and then say that, folks, it turns out that machine learning now has become a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary skill. So can we offer certain courses? Can we offer certain open electives, which is intended for the ECE students to learn the basics of machine learning, so that now, so this is the feedback loop I am talking about, right? So this will have a very significant impact. Okay. Now, once we have made that, now we need to have the management to also engage into this. When I'm talking about management, I'm talking at the academic council level, or at the board of studies level, or no, at various levels, because we may need to now provide resources for action to be taken. Okay. Now going back to the same example, if the ECE department never had a full-fledged programming lab inside that, maybe this is something that needs to be set up. Maybe we need to hire instructors who would teach Python for them to be able to do these analysis, right? So that is what that is where the management engagement involvement comes into the picture. When I'm talking about the resources, I'm talking about the computational resources, the financial resources. They need to hire instructors to be able to do that, right? And second part of closing the loop is to go back and tell your internship partners that what is the action that we have taken, right? Because they are the ones who marked so many people as novices on certain competencies. So it is in our own interest, so that they will come back next time to tell them that, see, look, we have heard your feedback, and we have made these curriculum changes in order to ensure that the students have these particular competencies at a novice level while they are already leaving it, so that you can push them to go towards the intermediate and the advanced stages. So that mechanism has to be created. Okay, so this can be in the form of engaging industry partners in our board of studies. So ensure that there is an agenda item put in your board of studies meeting which says that what is the action that we have taken based on this particular feedback that we received, based on the assessments of the interns that we have done. Okay, and secondly, right, so we also have to, another mechanism could be that as part of the pre-placement talks, when they come to the campus for a pre-placement, have a specific segment, have invite them to a separate meeting. The placement in charge or the head of the department can specifically talk to them. For this particular, you have come to hire students for this kind of job profiles. I would like to update you that these are all the improvements to the curriculum we have done, so that they are directly relevant for the internships. So this is very important to for closing the loop. So effectively, internships focus on giving them experiential learning to develop their skills and competencies, right, in various domains. We have already seen what are the subtle differences between the skills and the competencies and what is the interplay between them. Okay, and we have to design the rubrics very carefully, and also be transparent about that, right, both to the with the interns as well as the people who will use those rubrics for the assessments. So when I say they have to be designed carefully, we talked about the SMART principles, right? So that needs to be incorporated. And it is just not good enough to create the rubrics and probably even use the rubrics, but then we need to create a reliable mechanism to collect that particular data, because we just talked about it. No, closing the feedback loop on the basis of data gives us a much more stronger conviction to what we are doing, and we can also measure the improvements that we have tried to bring to the overall system of this curriculum development and implementation, and to the overall outcomes of the programs itself. Okay, so that is essentially what we talked about as far as assessments for internships.